And that brings to mind something that you and I and Senator Donna Campbell, who has sponsored the companion legislation in the Senate, also a medical doctor in the Texas legislature, have had leading up to this session, which is, yes, we need the legislation to be effective. We need it to be constitutional, to your point, Dr. Richards, but it also needs to be compassionate. So I'd love, this is a question really for the whole panel. Why is that compassionate part of the equation something that's so important to each of you in terms of a legislative or a public policy approach to this issue?
I think it's absolutely crucial simply because it's the right thing to do. I mean, the answer's sort of obvious. I mean, the reality is that when you first are confronted with this medicine and these procedures, you're outraged. But the reality is that it's also a response to something that's happening. One of the myths out there, in addition to the myth that this reduces suicidality, is the idea that we're not actually seeing a massive social contagion. But the reality is, gender dysphoria, until recently, was an extremely rare phenomenon, mostly restricted to prepubescent boys, and almost all of them tended to grow out of it if they were allowed to do that. We have a massive increase in people presenting with these symptoms, and the majority of them are girls. These are people that are struggling mightily. I mean, imagine the difficulty of feeling an alienation from your body. You don't have another one, right? It's your body. And so we have to find the right way to respond to that. Not only compassion for the kids that are going through this, but the parents that have in many cases gotten sucked into it. And so any legislative response needs to take that into account. Make sure we stop the people from doing the bad stuff, but insofar as we can, at least for a legislature and for a government, to be able to respond compassionately to the people that are hurting.
Chloe?
I mean, compassion is exactly what these kids need, and it's oftentimes what they're missing. I mean, a lot of these kids, they have their psychiatric issues are not being properly addressed. A lot of them have undiagnosed autism, and a lot of them have been victims of some sort of abuse or trauma. And you won't really see like the popular kid in the school transitioning. It's often the kid who is outcast, doesn't really have very many friends, isn't very active in like school sports or clubs or anything like that. They're just lonely, and all they really need is they need to know that they're loved.
Absolutely. Very well. Compassion as you're approaching this subject as a legislator, how does that play in?
Well, I mean, I think I should begin by just saying, Chloe, I want to apologize to you on behalf of my colleagues, because, and every other young person like you that I think is just getting ground up in the gears of what has become political activism and pseudoscience. And you deserve better than that. I feel like my profession failed you as a person, as a human being that was crying out for help, that needed guidance. And I feel like we failed you. I feel like we lied to your parents, and we lied to you when we told you that this is going to solve all your problems, that this is totally reversible, that, nothing bad's going to happen. We are not normally given the ability to act in a way that is that ethically and morally irresponsible as doctors. We are most often held to a much higher standard. When I administer anesthesia to a patient, I have to explain the risks and benefits thoroughly, and including the possibility that you might die. It's very unlikely, but it could happen. And yet I feel, listening to your story, like you never had that. You never got that. And that you were basically brought along almost on a tidal wave of sort of activism with very little actual compassion and very little actual science and disclosure and truth. And I feel like we owed you better than that. But what I want you to know is that we not only regret that, but I'm going to make sure that I know that you're not alone, and that there are a lot of detransitioners, and you have no access to medical care for your particular needs. There's not an insurance company I'm aware of that covers that. And I want to see that change too, because you know what? the least we can do is make sure that for the rest of your life you get access to the care that you need. And I just want you to know that you're loved, and that we admire your courage, and that people like me in the medical community regret what happened to you, but we're not going to abandon you.
Thank you, sir. That means a lot to me.